All right. Good morning and welcome to the summer business meeting of the Council on Post-Secondary Education. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube for the general public. The only time that will not apply is if we go into executive session, which I do not anticipate occurring today. All audio and video is being captured and recorded, and in order to participate in the meeting, your video must be turned on. When you're not the active speaker, please ensure your microphone is muted. To ensure all council members are able to be seen during the vote, we ask participating staff to keep their video turned off unless they are asked to present. Does anyone have any questions? If not, Heather, please call the roll.
Certainly. Mr. Ron Beal.
Here.
Chair Ben Brandsetter.
Here.
Vice Chair Kim Hallbauer.
Here.
Ms. Lori Harper.
Here.
Mr. Lucas Menzer. Mr. Grant Minix.
Here.
Ms. Donna Moore. Ms. Christy Nelson.
Here.
Mr. Richard Nelson. Ms. Vidya Ravichandran.
Here.
Dr. Robert Statt.
Here.
Ms. Carol Wright. Ms. Cheryl Zimmerman.
Here.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that is quorum.
Great.
Oh, and also, sorry, Commissioner Kevin Brown.
Here.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Before we begin our business today, I did want to take a minute and recognize today's date of June 19th, otherwise known as Juneteenth. For those of you who do not know the significance of this day, Juneteenth is an annual holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. While this date has been celebrated in the African American communities for over a century, incidents in recent years have brought a renewed awareness as a day that celebrates freedom for all. President Thompson will be speaking more on this matter later during his report. However, I did want to start our day to recognize its importance and encourage you and your family to take some personal time today to reflect on what Juneteenth means to you.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Christy. And I look forward to hearing President Thompson's observations on this here shortly. The meeting minutes from our April 24th council meeting is in your materials. Are there any objections to those as presented?
No.
All right, seeing none, they are approved as distributed. Before we get to the business matters of our meeting today, I would like to take an opportunity to reorder the agenda a little bit and go ahead with section 10A, the proposed council resolutions. We have 3 resolutions to consider adopting, and I'm very pleased that each of the recipients are able to join us on the line this morning. First is a resolution for John Roush, who has served as president of Center College for 22 years. Through his leadership and vision, he has continued the university's strong commitment to academic excellence, engagement, and the inclusion, and secured his reputation as a leading liberal arts college in the South. President Thompson, since you have worked with President Roush the longest, would you like to add any additional comments at this time?
Yes, thank you, Chair Brandstetter. I've known John for a long time, and we've had a lot of good discussions at many different levels. 3 things I know about John to be 100% true. First of all, he is, in fact, maybe one of the best presidents I've ever seen anywhere. And I don't think anyone would argue against that point. Number 2, when he decided that he wanted to, since we're celebrating Juneteenth a little bit, when he knew that he needed to really diversify his campus, both with students and with faculty and staff, nothing stood in his way. He went out wholeheartedly and with the kind of emotional intelligence you would expect from someone like John, and did exactly that. And number 3, if you didn't know Center at the level that some of us do, you would have always thought it was the best institution of all times for decades. Well, I tell you, John took it to a new level. And he took it to a level that, in fact, added to Kentucky and the nation as far as talking about the value of higher education, especially a strong liberal arts education. So, John, you're a good close friend of mine. I'm going to miss you here in Kentucky, but I got a feeling you'll still be making your footprints. Good to have you here, sir.
Thank you, Aaron, very much.
President Roush, would you like to add any words at this time?
I'm not often at a loss for words, and I'm not this time. It's been a pleasure, a joy, a blessing to be involved in this work for 22 years. I can promise you, when I got here on July 1st of 1998, which, by the way, was my 48th birthday, and on the chance that any of you are taking notes, that means the 1st of July this year is my 70th birthday. And Susie and I have had a great run. I keep being asked, what do you think you'll miss most? And I have a single answer. And it would include people like Aaron Thompson in that list, the people. And I know I'll have occasions to continue to see the people and run into them and catch up on their lives and all the rest. But, there's just the interaction and the engagement with other people on a daily basis who care about doing right, who care about doing good, who care about making a difference. That will be an adjustment of sorts. But I've never had a life plan. I know that it won't surprise most of you, and it certainly won't surprise Aaron. But my single plan has just been to try to do something that counts with my life of work and service. That's what I've told our students that they should prepare for. And so as I turn away to a new idea, a new opportunity, that's my plan. Make a difference that matters, do something that counts. And that's about all the specifics I got. So thank you for those kind words. I appreciate so much what each of you do in the life of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. That too has become a great love for Susie and me, is to care about this state and its people, and making sure that Kentucky advances at a higher rate of speed than some of those states with which we might compete. And I think that's happened, and you all and others like you are a big part of the reason why that's true. So thank you to you.
Thank you, John. We appreciate your service, and congratulations. Happy birthday in a couple of weeks, and enjoy retirement. Our second resolution is proposed for CP staff, so Sharon Jackson. He has tried to retire a number of times over the last few years, and CPE keeps bringing him back. And after a total of 40 years of service, he is finally retiring for good and moving to Georgia. So we want to thank you for your service. Wish you the best of luck. Bill Payne, would you like to add any additional words at this time?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Chair Brandstetter. Sharon Jackson and I have worked together for nearly 20 years. I came to the council in 2001. Sharon was our chief EEO officer. He worked in the finance unit and was already an expert at that time in anything capital project related. But over the years, I've worked closely with Sharon. He has been a good coworker, a good colleague. More than that, he's been a very good friend. And I'm going to really miss Sharon when he's gone. And I believe I said this at the Finance Committee meeting. The good news is that he and his wife, Daphne, are planning to move back to the Madison, Mississippi, Ridgeland, Mississippi area. And a lot of my family live in Madison, Mississippi. And so I look forward to getting together with Sharon Thanksgiving, Christmas, whenever I go down to visit my family. So I'm going to keep in touch with Dr. Jackson, as I call him. So Sharon, thank you for all of your hard work and congratulations on your retirement.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. And I apologize for saying you're going to Georgia. It's actually Mississippi. So, but wherever you are, and we do appreciate your service. And would you like to say a few words before you retire?
Well, Ben, thank you very much, and I want to thank Bill Payne for the kind words and observations. And yes, it's really good to be able to sit back and enjoy the retirement that we all work towards as we move through our careers and et cetera. I've enjoyed my time at the Council on Post-Secondary Education. And before now, it was the Council on Higher Education when I came around. And the accomplishments of the organization are very good and have moved us forward as time has passed, and we've had good presidents both at the institutional level and at the CPE level, whose goal and objective was to ensure that Kentucky's citizens were given every option and opportunity to succeed in acquiring a post-secondary education and start their career. I thank you all very much. I am enjoying my retirement. I wish you the best. And all of those other words that would go along with that. You all have a very good meeting.
Thank you, Sharon. We appreciate it. And thank you for your service. The final resolution today is for our student board member, Grant Minix. Today is Grant's final board meeting, and it's disappointing to have to be by Zoom, but such is the case. Your insight on student issues and concerns, especially recently, has been invaluable, and we appreciate your input. Whether you're going to graduate school or directly into the workforce, on behalf of the council, I would like to congratulate you on your graduation from Eastern Kentucky University, and thank you for your service to the council and Kentucky's college students. Grant, would you like to say a few words at this point in time?
Yeah. Well, thank you all for this fantastic opportunity. When I first came to college, I never dreamed that I'd get these kind of experiences. I'm just incredibly blessed to be able to work with all of you and just learn so much. I want to thank you for all of that and taking me in and helping me do this. And that's such a big step. I really like the work we've done. I've tried to make sure we can bring students into the process as much as possible, and I think that's something important and something that really needs to be continued, because the work we're doing ultimately affects students more than it does anyone else. And I hope that it continues to be practiced, and I'm sure it will with the people here. And I just want to thank all of you all. It's been an incredible experience for me. I've learned so much, and I'm looking forward. I've decided to continue my education, to go back to Eastern and get my master's in public administration. So I'm excited for that. And if you all ever need anything, or just don't ever hesitate to reach out, and I would extend those to you as well. So thank you all.
Thank you, Grant. Well, you've made a lot of phenomenal relationships over the last year. It's hard to believe it's been a year, but if you echo what President Roush said, it's about the people and who you're able to interact with and build relationships with. So that's going to serve you well as you finish school and enter into a career. All three resolutions are in your materials for review, and do I have a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Harper and a second by Dr. Stapp. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all for your service and time. Next item is section 3, report from KDE Commissioner Kevin Brown. Commissioner Kevin Brown is from the Department of Education, is here today. Commissioner, would you like to provide us an update on P12 activities?
Sure. Thank you so much, Chair Brandstetter. two major issues I'll go over today, obviously COVID-19 and then and how we're preparing for the reopening of school, which I also know is on this council's agenda for post-secondary. And then I'll give you a brief update on the commissioner search. As I've stated in previous council meetings, the department started in March by using the words educate, feed, and support as our guiding words to try to get us through the COVID-19 crisis that then became a pandemic. And of course, at that time in March, I think we all thought we would get through it and we would end up all at the Derby, and it would just be a short-term issue we had to deal with. Of course, now it has become part of our way of life, and that until we have a vaccine or a treatment, we know that we're having to take extraordinary measures to deal with it. And so we are now of course, districts will continue to educate, feed, and we will continue to support them as we move into the year. But we have added, and if you look on the department's COVID-19 website, reopening guidance, of course, and guidance on reopening is our major focus over the summer, in addition to summer learning opportunities for students to address learning loss. Beginning May 15th, KDE issued the first guidance document to districts. That will be that was the first, and we will end up issuing around 15 guidance documents along with public health by July 13th. Some states are using an approach to, issue a major 200-page guidance document. We took a different issuing guidance documents as we had them ready and as we thought school districts needed the information. So for example, the first guidance document released May 15th, those were overarching considerations for reopening schools and how to engage communities in that process and develop local district and school-based committees to discuss reopening and how that might look for the committee. So much how we dealt with school closures, which was voluntary on parts of school districts. The governor did not issue an order closing school districts. The governor simply convened all the superintendents together and recommended closure in a recognition of that local control that our school districts have. We also were going in that same vein on our reopening guidance, knowing that districts are starting to survey their communities to learn what the community feeling is towards reopening. And for example, I know of at least one school district based on community feedback. There's a large fear in the community of going back into congregate settings. That district is going to be starting out, at least at their plan right now, in full non-traditional instruction at least the first few weeks. Other school districts, and I think the majority, will be opening to in-person classes in mid-August to early September. If you recall, we did encourage districts to take a look at opening in late July as recommended by the governor, just because there could be a spike of cases in the fall. And I'm hearing maybe some post-secondary institutions are maybe taking advantage of that in some form or fashion. I don't think we're going to have any districts take advantage of that, just because it's going to take all summer long to get prepared, get the appropriate PPE in place and everything. So it looks like most school districts will be starting in mid-August to early September. And then I would also add, we're believing that we're going to have a hybrid type of attendance. And what I mean by that is, in previous school years, much like you have in post-secondary, you either have everyone on campus or everyone in classrooms, or if you're called off for snow, everyone is home. And then in the case of P12, we were learning at the end of last semester using non-traditional instruction. Everyone was doing that. Well, this semester we believe it will be a hybrid approach. We're hearing from community members and families that some parents are just don't want to send their child into in-person classes just because there's a lot of unknowns. There's the face covering issue, the social distancing, and some students are scared, and that's understandable. So we're making arrangements for districts to meet parents and families where they are. So even though the current statutes and regulations don't even contemplate a scenario where maybe 10% of an elementary school wants to learn at home, and the remaining students are going to be in a classroom using social distancing and face coverings and all the public health recommendations. We are going to make that happen this year. And so over the next few days, you're going to see a potential combination between a waiver by the State Board of Education and or the governor and lieutenant governor using their executive emergency authority to grant a little bit of flexibility on how we count attendance and funding just for this semester and for next year, so school districts can meet students where they are. Now, having said that, we have to continue improving non-traditional instruction, and districts are doing that. I think non-traditional instruction on May 27th, I think, which was the last day we had schools in session in definitely Jefferson, maybe Fayette, that non-traditional instruction was better than it was in March, but it was still not where we need it to be. It is obviously never going to be comparable to in-person classes, but we do know that districts are striving for continuous improvement. They do have access to federal funds to increase purchase of technology that can be sent to students' homes, that can improve virtual instruction. The department, we are using some of those federal funds for some of the cloud-based services that we provide school districts, for example, to districts now will be able to completely go to online registration because of some cloud-based purchases we made at the state level. So some things like that that are going on to try to make things easier, a little more streamlined. However, obviously it's going to be a heavy lift. I'm hearing from some superintendents that we're giving too much guidance at the state level, these 15 documents. I'm hearing from some superintendents that we're not giving enough guidance. And so that may tell me that we're in the right place. The flagship, I call it the flagship of the 15 documents, will likely be the document that the Department of Public Health will issue for P12 in the coming days. And that's the document that really dives down into the weeds about face coverings, how many students on a bus, temperature checks. And then, of course, that goes right in line with the majority of the rest of those 14 documents, primarily authored by KDE. And for example, some of those guidance documents that we have issued or will issue talk about social emotional learning as students come back, having been pretty much traumatized in some form or fashion due just to the way the school year ended, not having closure with their friends, not having activities. Obviously, teaching and learning, we're issuing 2 guidance documents in 2 stages, a guidance document on how to, and the best practices for evaluating students when they come back to evaluate learning loss and how to address that. And then, of course, additional guidances on things down into the weeds about transportation and working with the Kentucky Center for School Safety on how do you do a fire drill and a tornado drill, which we need to still do when we're in school. How do you do that, though, when you're dealing with the global pandemic? And so all of those things will be coming and have some of them have already been issued to school districts. We're also participating with the Southern Regional Education Board. They are issuing a playbook to assist school districts. We are part of that task force, heavily involved with that. Of course, as you know, Dr. Pruitt is the executive president of SREB, and so that will be also very helpful for school districts to have that playbook. And a playbook is how I've described it to superintendents. Superintendents are going to be sending to the department by July, the end of July, their calendar for next year. We've extended that date, but we know that that calendar is probably not going to stay the same as it was submitted to the department on paper, and that's okay. What we're telling districts, we need you to have in your back pocket a playbook of how you may need to pivot towards, you may open normally, even though you're going to be having social distancing. You may open normally, but you may, in a few weeks, if we have a spike, need to close. And as or shift over to non-traditional instruction. And as the governor said this week on the press conference, one of the benefits of contact tracing will be that if we have a COVID case in a school, for example, and it's pinpointed obviously to a child in a classroom, it looks like because of contact tracing, we will be able to pinpoint that classroom. And if we need to have quarantining of students, it would likely just be a classroom, or could potentially even just be a certain group of students that were in close proximity at the cafeteria table with that student. So that's some good news, in that I believe as we move forward, if we do have positive cases in our schools, we will be able to be more precise and not have to close entire schools or districts down as we move forward. That's not to say that there's still a lot of anxiety out there. I think that one of the new if you just go online and read, you'll find many articles about face coverings or masks. I'm starting to call them face coverings because they can exist in many different forms, but that's quickly becoming a cultural issue and a divisive issue. And I know our schools and our teachers are going to be faced with that as they come back, because there are varying opinions on whether or not that should be required. And we, of course, believe it should, and we believe that's very solid advice from public health, and that our schools need to model that. And we believe our schools and our administrators and teachers will model it. We also know it will be a challenge, though, as they implement that with students. And then finally, the commissioner search, my favorite subject. As you know, I'm not a candidate for the commissioner's position. However, I'm very pleased that the state board, they are moving along with our search. I know some states that had their commissioner search in place have held those off a little bit because of the pandemic, and we're moving forward. And I think that was the right choice for Kentucky. And of course, Dr. Thompson serves on the state board. The state board has been very engaged, and I think the candidates have been narrowed to 6. And we will going to be moving forward next week with narrowing those candidates down a little further. And it looks like there's a possibility we could have a new commissioner on the ground somewhere between August 1st and September 1st. That's what I'm telling myself. And so I'm excited about that. And I'm certainly willing to support the department as we move forward, and welcome the new commissioner when he or she arrives, and to have that great transition. Happy to take any questions, and thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Commissioner. Does anybody have any questions for Commissioner Brown? All right. Well, Commissioner, maybe if this is your last meeting, that may be a good. You're smiling already, but we'll see how that timing works out. But thank you for that very detailed update, and we appreciate what you do there.
Thank you.
President Thompson, time for your report.
There we go. I got it off mute. Well, first of all, let me just say that it's a pleasure working with Commissioner Brown. Indeed, I've been thoroughly impressed at his ability to step in the middle of this crisis and seamlessly do the things you needed to do to make it not as much of a crisis as it could be. So, Kevin, it's really good to work with you. Ben and Kim asked me Monday to give a little update on Juneteenth. And I really appreciate seeing what the governor just did. And I also appreciated hearing what Kim was doing, or they were doing at Fifth Third. This is the time that, in fact, we should be looking at how to bring together as many of us as possible to address as many of the historical artifacts of racism in a variety of areas that we deal with. And so Juneteenth is an opportunity to celebrate that. And Juneteenth is really an interesting holiday for me, because even though the Emancipation Proclamation came in 1863, it really didn't end slavery. Then the war was won by the North. Well, that was supposed to end slavery too, but it didn't. Texas, Galveston, is where really it stated that the war was finally done, when the rest of the African Americans realized that they were no longer slaves. And that has a whole different element to it for me, because over the many years, and I voiced this to people when I talk, I saw my mother and father vote for the first time in their lives in 1968. So Juneteenth is a representative piece of what we need to do as much as what has been done. And seeing everybody recognize this as a day to celebrate, as a holiday, for lack of a better reasoning, to celebrate, and having all of us do it together. African Americans have been celebrating this day for way over 100 years. But looking at what we're talking about Juneteenth means now, we're talking about the things that the council is doing, working on equity, looking at putting items in place that systematically promote that we know higher education matters, and it matters to everybody. And it just doesn't matter to a few, but it matters to all. So as we look at Juneteenth to move forward, I would hope that the council recognizes exactly the way Ben did coming into this conversation, recognize this as not just a celebration for African Americans or a celebration that talked about our history, but it's as much of a celebration as vowing to actually do something about never having to repeat this ever again. And so education to me is key to this conversation. And it's also key to how we address, in my opinion, how we address all the other disparities in our society, whether it's healthcare, criminal justice, and everything else. And so I appreciate the recognition, Ben. I appreciate, Kim, that you all pushed me to talk a little bit about this. And it's not just about the Union General Granger going to Galveston and telling African Americans that they were free. It is about actually getting to a point where we realize that freedom still lags behind in certain other categories, and that is what we're trying to do. So a couple other items. Governor Beshear, as you all know, gave us $13.8 million of the GEAR funding to issue to our campuses. We have already informed them of what they will be receiving. KCTCS will be receiving $2.5 million of that. $1 million will go to the private nonprofits, and then we're putting $8.8 million to the public universities. But we're keeping $1.5 million at the council to focus on items that may pop up throughout this 12 months that we can use to enhance what needs to be done to make sure that we are opening correctly, that we're doing the things we need to do. The CPE data and analytics team, they're always stepping up to the plate. This partnership we had with MZ that looked at engineering and what we needed in the state and how we were doing a lot better than we were doing a few years ago. And we're proud of that. But we also know that we're going to have to, this is going to affect us somewhat with the budget cuts, but we're going to have to step up and do more of this to help move the economy along in this state. We're also getting ready to do one on healthcare and seeing exactly how we can promote those unique healthcare situations, not just with nurses or doctors, but in all those areas that are important in healthcare. The Academic Affairs Unit is hosting a lot of statewide information sharing around COVID-19, and they have been attended extremely well by all of our campuses. We're just opening them up, say, come and join if you want to, and they're joining. So I appreciate Melissa Bell and her crew for serving that piece during this time of crisis. Dawn and Travis later on will be talking about what's going on with the higher equity matters. And we've had a lot of webinars. I think I did one a couple of weeks ago, and we had like 300 and some people attend. And then apparently there's hundreds more that watch the video afterwards. So I appreciate what they are doing and to advance what's going on in the state in this area. And we'll also, I think Dr. Staff, and they will be giving an update on those who made, who passed the diversity test, if you will, and those that didn't. But we still have hope that we can continue to get better. I'm currently serving on the search committee, as you heard Commissioner Brown say, for the Commissioner of Education. We've been spending a lot of time on that, and we'll spend some more time. But I'm also serving on the search committee for KCTCS president, and that should be starting up again fairly soon. So Jay is only going to be with us until September. So we need to probably push that along fairly fast. I'm giving testimony next week, or July 8th, I guess. I think I'll have Bob Jackson with me. Thank you, Bob. And we'll have OJ at the table, OJ Oleka. And we're going to be talking about all the things we're faced with in higher education around this COVID-19. Yes, and we are looking at different ways of opening for the fall. Many may close by Thanksgiving. Many may start later and go longer. I mean, there's a variety of ways that we're looking at this, but campuses have really responded to us. We did set aside the criteria for them to look at, got it approved by Dr. Stack and the governor, and we've now met with Dr. Stack once, and we'll be meeting with him again. So we are moving along at a fairly decent clip. We're hoping that we can, in fact, make this happen in the fall. And finally, I do want to thank my staff. They've just stepped up to the plate in more ways than one. I mean, they have just done a Herculean job in performing what they needed to perform. We have had 4 of our staff members actually be deployed to the unemployment insurance claims and working on that. We've got Mary Allison, Amber, we've got Ivy, and we have Amber Dawson, Ivy Robinson, and Bethany Butler, who has been working with that crew to try to get these claims solved. So as a whole, Chair Branstetter, we've been busy, probably in a more interesting way than ever. And I hope that in the September meeting, we can really talk strategically about what this means coming in to the next year, what we can continue doing and what maybe we can't do. So with that in mind, that's my report.
Thank you, President Thompson, and I appreciate your insight and perspective on Juneteenth. You know, I think we have a tendency in this crowd to focus so much on the data and closing. We've talked so much about closing the gap, and we've made a lot of progress on that in the last few years. But sometimes it's good to get back to the personal level and away from the data every now and then. So thank you for that. Next item on our agenda is item 5, campus reopening planning update. I'd like to turn the meeting over to CPE's Greg Roush, who will lead this discussion along with Bob Jackson, president at Murray State University. Greg?
Thank you, Chair Branstetter. I'm going to go over briefly the planning structure that we've put together for the campuses fully opening in the fall, and then I'll turn it over to President Jackson, who will get into a little more detail about what the campuses are facing as we go through this. Similar to what Commissioner Brown mentioned about K-12, the governor never issued an order closing our campuses. This was a voluntary decision that our presidents made very quickly, and I think responded very quickly to what was happening nationally. And really, our campuses never closed. There's some level of operation that continued at each of the campuses, whether it was housing for students that didn't have anywhere to go, or international students, facilities issues, administrative issues. The campuses have kept some level of operation going. And of course, obviously UK and UofL with the hospital operations have kept some level of operation going throughout this entire period. But as we begin to turn to summer and fall, the discussion of when we begin to bring students back has become the focus. early on, all the campuses agreed and made the decision that summer instruction would be online, with one exception that I'll get into in a very limited way a little bit later. And there's been a lot of coordination, I believe, between the presidents and President Thompson. They've met weekly, I believe, President Jackson, it's weekly, and continue to have conversations about and share with each other, I think, approaches and what each of them plan to do to deal with this. We have, I think the universities are well positioned to deal with this issue because all of them have some type of health operation. And I think they have staff and resources available that have helped them as we've moved through this. Early on, there was a decision between the presidents and President Thompson to develop a set of guiding principles, and I believe that's included in your board materials today. It's high level, but it's kind of a statement of what's important in this process, and primary there is the safety of students, faculty, staff, and all the stakeholders that are affected by or involved with the universities, because I think that's been the main guiding principle in all this is how do we continue operations and how do we move into the fall while we protect vulnerable populations and we protect everyone that comes to the campus as best we can. Those principles were adopted in early May, I think around May 1st. And then as we moved beyond that into more detailed planning, we took a template that had been developed by KCTCS and President Box for their use, and we expanded that template to be appropriate for all the universities. And it's because each university is so different, there's not going to be one plan that fits every institution. They reside in different communities, different operations. How they handle housing is different, how they handle food service is different. So we tried to develop an overall template that focused on the items to be addressed, not specifically how to address them. And so that left the detail to the institutions and allowed them to craft a plan that worked best for their operation. And that template's organized around 9 broad categories, which is everything from staff to academic services to athletics, dining, housing, and the areas that they need to deal with to be ready to bring students back to the campuses. There is a lot of guidance out there for higher education, and I know that the presidents and their staff have relied on these and shared these particular this information. The CDC has a fairly robust set of suggestions and guidance on measures for higher education institutions. The American College Health Association has a very comprehensive document that I know they're aware of. And then there's more specific guidance out there that is focused on more particular areas, such as the NCAA has guidance on how to move forward and as they tackle with the issue of what athletics are going to look like in the fall. After this, the template was put together and the principles were established. As President Thompson mentioned, these were presented to the governor's office and to Commissioner Stack and Department of Public Health. And they were comfortable with these as we moved forward. And actually we used this for a limited reopening of KCTCS at the end of May. There were a number of students statewide that had to get back into a lab to complete coursework in technical fields. And KCTCS was able to bring them back, I believe, the last week of May on a very kind of controlled environment and with significant measures in place. And KCTCS has reported on that, and I think things went well. I don't think there were any major issues. It's obviously was an adjustment and provided challenges, but it kind of allowed KCTCS to have a little bit of a test run, which I think was good. And they were kind enough to prepare kind of a document on how that went. which will be helpful, I think, for the other universities as we move forward. The campuses have all developed their plans at this point, although it's important to understand that these will change. And we've tried to be as flexible as possible with that. A lot of the plans, I think that we had to get something out early because you have to begin planning the fall now, but all of them are broad enough to address any resurgence that we may have or any issues that happen as we go forward. As Commissioner Brown mentioned, you know, the state is in a different position now with the ability to test and the contact tracing process. If there is a resurgence, more than likely the response can be more targeted. Rather than a broad statewide shutdown, you can focus on particular areas and even maybe down to a classroom or smaller, depending on how this happens and how the contact tracing goes. Kind of a final point is Lead Emmix is working to set up a regular meeting with between CPE and whatever representatives from the campuses are necessary and the Department of Public Health. So as we get closer to the fall, we can have kind of more robust and complete discussions with public health officials. Universities have all worked with the public health departments in their area. And I believe those conversations have been productive and helpful, but we want to try to make sure that at the state level, the governor's office and the public health officials are comfortable as we move forward. So then that's basically the process to this point. And Chair, would you prefer that President Jackson go on, or do you want to hold for any questions right now?
No, I think President Jackson would be great to hear from you now.
Okay.
Greg, thank you. Chair Brandstetter, members of the council, President Thompson, thank you for inviting me today. I appreciate it very much. If I could take a moment of just personal privilege and off track for a second. President Roush, I want to thank him. I know he's just left the call. I want to thank him for his service. He has served well and he served a long time. I've had the honor to work with him for many years too. And we're going to miss him. Commissioner Brown, we're going to miss you. Haven't worked with you as long, but I've known you a long time back during my government service days. Grant, thank you for your service. And probably most importantly, I may be one of the longest serving colleagues of Sharon Jackson. So I date back with Sharon to when it was the Council on Higher Education. I've had the honor of working with him for many, many years. And he's a friend and a colleague, and I hope he's listening because he means a whole lot to Murray State and me personally. And during my government service, he was always very helpful. So Sharon, thank you for your service. I want to touch on several things, and if you have questions at the end, I know you'll ask them, but Greg covered broadly several topics. I want to thank President Thompson, CPE staff, all of you, council members, for your leadership. This has been, and I think most of us would say this, the most difficult 4 months of our professional careers, and probably any period of our lives. You know, who would have thought in January, as we were entering a new year, we would be faced with an international pandemic that would really change this country. It changed higher education. It changed all of our institutions very, very quickly. We had to respond very quickly. Our people, each of the respective institutions stepped up accordingly. You all have provided us great assistance. The CPE staff has been just wonderful. President Thompson has been a great friend and colleague and ally, and I appreciate that very much. These are overused terms today. They were not in January, they are today, but you know, this is an unimaginable, unprecedented period in our history. And it takes all of us working together to navigate you know, through these times. With that being said, we made a decision in my role as convener of the president's in partnership with President Thompson, that we would have our presidents meet weekly or regularly. We meet nearly every week. There were several weeks we met more than once a week. And we've all learned together. We've all worked together. We've helped each other. We've developed plans together. We had to. I really think, and I've been around this Commonwealth in some capacity in the higher ed world for a long, long time. But this brought our groups together very closely, where we had to work together and in a very positive way, and we have. And I'm very pleased with that. I'm very thankful to my fellow presidents at the other institutions. This was touched on by President Thompson as well as Greg. You know, during these meetings we've had with our presidents over the last many weeks, we've heard from the governor, and these were private Zoom conversations that we've had, so everyone could talk very openly and frankly and ask each other for ideas and how are we doing certain things. And it was just a very good collaborative set of meetings that we continue to have, and we probably will be having for many weeks going forward. We've heard from Budget Director Hicks. We've heard from legal experts. We've heard from Dr. Stack and other health experts. We've discussed operational matters, and that list goes on and on. So I want you all to know that, because everyone's making good plans and everyone's moving together in a very, very positive way. Also, I want to point out that President Thompson, President Box, and myself, we represent Kentucky on the SREB, the Southern Regional Education Board Restart Committee for colleges and universities. We've learned a lot from that group, 16 states. So we've learned a lot from that group. And I'm pleased to say, and I think Aaron would agree with me, no one has any better playbook that we've established than Kentucky. And even though all of our institutions' playbooks look a little bit different today, and there was no playbook 2 months ago, I'm very pleased personally, and I think all of you should be very pleased with what we've built over the last many weeks. Again, especially as we compare ourselves to 16 other states. Let me touch on just for a moment a few items. Every institution, as Greg pointed out, has a plan, and they're good plans. I want to speak specifically to Murray State's plan for just a moment. Lee may have included in your packet a PDF of our plans, about 32 pages, a website that we now have, a video that we now have. If not, you can go to murraystate.edu/racer-restart, and you can learn all about how we're going to restart campus in a few weeks. We started working on our plan many weeks ago. And we knew, our administrators knew, our faculty and staff knew, and I knew that restarting campus would be very, very difficult. It would be much harder than slowing campus down. Restarting operations by a multiple of 10 will be more difficult as we move forward in the next several days. Our plan included participation, a group of committees, a group of subcommittees, and about 200 faculty, staff, students, healthcare administrators, administrators on our campus. So nearly 200 people participated in developing the plan that you either have, or again, I'll reference you to the website in that regard. So you'll see a bunch of guiding principles for Murray State University that dovetail with what Greg referenced in the broader guiding principles that we had as a state, the guiding principles that the governor's established, and we appreciate his leadership in regard to this particular topic. He's been excellent in that regard. Again, President Thompson and all of the presidents have worked very closely, again, in establishing those principles that helped our 200 people establish our personalized plan as we move forward. We're using a phased-in approach at Murray State University. Other institutions are using very similar approaches to this. So June, the month of June, was our planning and preparation period, or is our planning and preparation period. So a lot of work is going on campus to get ready for August. July is really the full implementation of all of these decisions that we've made in recent weeks. And so July will be an extremely busy month, and August 1 is the third phase, and that will really be the full restart of our campus operations. The items that we've looked at, and there were several components, so there's several subcommittees at Murray State in regard to these overarching key strategies, prevention measures and how to minimize risk on our campus, health procedures, academic affairs and instructional delivery. It's going to look different. It's going to look very different in some places and in some cases. We've talked about the impact on faculty and staff and the many considerations that we have to include there, facilities management and the impact on our facilities, whether it's a classroom facility or an athletic facility. We're looking at, and we've have guidelines in regard to travel and events, student affairs, housing, dining, athletics, and that list goes on and on. Anything, any component of an institution you can think of, we have a plan and that's either in place or is evolving as we move forward. We adjusted our academic calendar about a month ago. I want to thank our academic leadership and the other leadership at Murray State in a very shared governance approach with faculty and staff and administration to develop that new academic calendar. The new academic calendar, a benefit that came out of that is we're going to have a brand new holiday term, we're going to call it. And that we have a winter term already, but a holiday term. It'll be online only, one course only, but it'll help our students complete programs more quickly, and it will benefit our faculty and the teaching and learning process. So our plan's a roadmap. It's evolving daily. A few weeks ago, it was evolving hourly. And as we move forward, we hope that the evolutionary process of this roadmap, this plan, slows just a bit. There's numerous considerations that, as I've said many times, some of our folks are tired of me saying this, we have more questions than answers, and we don't even know all the questions yet. And those questions, even though we're here and past the middle of June, there's still questions each and every day in regard to how we're going to respond as we move forward into the fall. Probably the most monumental decision-making process that any of our institutions have ever faced in their histories. I think if my fellow presidents were on here, they would say exactly the same thing. Lastly, and importantly, I'm confident of our ability and the ability of all of the institutions with the plans we put in place, with the plans that our sister institutions have put in place, that we're going to restart to the best of our abilities successfully. I've reviewed every plan that every institution has, because I wanted to see what everyone was doing and see if there's additional learning. And I know every president has done that from that standpoint. So I think we all feel very good about the path forward in that regard. Mr. Chair, I'll stop there, and there may be questions in regard to what we're doing specifically or generally for me or Greg or President Thompson, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, President Jackson. Greg, thank you for your input as well. Do any of the council members have any questions at this time?
Ben, can I just make a comment? It's not a question, but Dr. Stack has been mentioned several times. I've been confused with that, and that's not me. The spelling is very similar, but people have asked me about it, and I'm not that Dr. Stack. I'm Dr. Stat.
Right. Dr. Stack, I know you, and I know your skill set's slightly different, but Dr. Stack has been helpful to us as our Chief Public Health Officer. We've met with him a number of times, so we appreciate him. And Dr. Stad, if you would like to join us for any of our meetings, we would welcome you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Is there anything else? Anybody else have any other comments? Obviously, this is going to continue to evolve as it has been for all of us over the last 3 to 4 months. But I appreciate your optimism, and that optimism will become infectious on campus and with all of your staff.
Mr. Chair, I would just like to thank, getting back to what Mr. Roush said about the KCTCS campuses opening for lab work and getting kids back in labs. That was extended also to our students from our various programs in high school dual credit programs, and the KCTCS and CPE were very generous and accommodating, and it was their idea actually to allow that. And it made it much easier for us to get our students into those 16 facilities. I know it wasn't an easy lift for KCTCS, but much easier than us trying to open up 52 area technology centers. So I just want to thank everyone for that partnership. And it also taught us, as was referenced by Mr. Roush, I know we're learning some things as well from that process that KCTCS engaged in on how we can open our facilities as well. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Commissioner. President Jackson, thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate your input and your insight, and you're welcome to stay as long as you would like.
Mr. Chair, thank you. If no questions, I will leave. I have another Zoom call here. Actually, I thought I'd be done by 5 minutes ago, and I'm going to jump on it for a few minutes. So I appreciate it. It's good to see everyone. Thank you for what you do.
All right, moving on. Item 6 is Finance Committee. And Heather, looks like you're adjusting the screen, so we get action items up here for us. Finance Committee met on June 9th and received an update on the funding related to the CARES Act and the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. Staff also presented the methodology and results of the 2020-2021 performance funding distribution. That information will not be covered in today's meeting, but is found in your onboard materials. If you have any questions, staff are prepared to respond to those now, or you can contact Bill Payne after today's meeting for more detail. Seeing no questions at this time, the committee also reviewed tuition and mandatory fee proposals from 6 institutions that, if approved today, will apply for the fall semester 2020, spring semester 2021, and summer semester 2021. As a reminder, at the April 24th meeting, the council approved to allow the post-secondary institutions the discretion to determine their own tuition and fee increases for resident undergraduate students for the upcoming academic year. Each institution was allowed to submit proposals that balance the needs of students and families and the resource needs of the institution. Additionally, the council approved institutions to submit for approval market competitive rates for graduate and online courses. The following proposals were reviewed by the Finance Committee on June 9th and are recommended for approval today. Morehead State University, Northern Kentucky University, and Western Kentucky University submitted a proposal that called for no increase to either their resident or non-resident base rates for the 2020-2021 academic year. Their rates would remain the same as the 2019-2020 academic year. Moving down, Kentucky State University submitted a proposal that called for no increase in their resident undergraduate base rate for the 2020-2021 academic year. The university also proposed to decrease their non-resident rate by 37.6%. Murray State University submitted a proposal that called for no increase in the resident undergraduate base rate for the 2020-2021 academic year. Of special note, the university historically charged a regional rate or a non-residential rate for out-of-state students depending on their home address. Beginning with the summer of 2020, all newly admitted non-resident students will be assessed the lower regional rate, thus eliminating the differing tuition structures and serving as a cost savings to some incoming non-resident students. You can see those differing rates on the slide under footnotes 2, 3, and 4. The Kentucky Community and Technical College System has requested a tuition increase of $5 per credit hour in its resident undergraduate base rate and an increase of $10 per credit hour for the non-resident base rate. Both increases equate to a 2.9% increase. Bill Payne is available to respond to specific questions on this topic if there are any at this time.
Mr. Chair, I would like to say that I think our Finance Committee worked really well this year. And if everything holds true, like I think it will hold true, this will be the lowest tuition rate we've had in decades. So just wanted to share that with all council members that may not know that. It's by far, it's going to be the lowest. So
yeah.
Appreciate the Finance Committee doing what the Finance Committee did.
If there are no questions, may I have a motion to accept the Finance Committee's recommendation to approve the tuition and mandatory fee proposals for these 6 institutions?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I got a motion from Ms. Zimmerman and a second from I'll say Dr. Stat. I think I heard that. Is that correct, Dr. Stat?
I was there, yes. I seconded it.
Good, thank you. Is there any discussion on these items?
Ben, you might indicate when U of L and UK's proposals will come through.
I'm going to touch on that right after this. And Eastern Kentucky University, yes.
Okay, that's fine.
We have a separate motion associated with those 3 institutions.
Okay.
All right. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. Motion carries, and thank you everybody for your input on that this year. And finally, there were 3 institutions whose boards have not yet met to approve tuition and fee rates: the University of Kentucky, University of Louisville, and Eastern Kentucky University. Those university boards will be meeting either today or before the end of June. And instead of pulling the full council together for a special meeting this summer to review these proposals, Finance Committee is requesting the council delegate authority for reviewing and approving those rates on its behalf. If approved, Heather will schedule a special meeting of the Finance Committee in early July to review these proposals. Are there any questions or comments on this requested delegation? And you can see the dates on when the next board meetings are for those institutions on the screen right now. Can I have a motion to delegate that authority to the Finance Committee?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Motion by Ms. Harper and I think a second by Ms. Hallbauer. Any further discussion on that?
That was Christy, Ben, not me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I was trying to go on the audio. Second by Ms. Nelson. And all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 7 is the Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee. I'd like to turn the meeting over to Lori Harper, Chair of the ASI Committee, for her report and the committee's recommendations.
Thank you very much, Chairman Branstetter. The Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee met on May 20th, and our discussions were centered around COVID-19 student success efforts and campuses reopening plans. We also received a number of updates regarding ongoing academic and student success initiatives and planned research for the next academic year. President Thompson discussed a few of those in his report. The committee also reviewed proposals of 6 new academic programs. Campus representatives discussed each program and answered the committee's questions sufficiently And the committee is recommending the approval of all 6. Heather has the programs displayed on the slide, but I'll read through them for the record. At Western Kentucky University, a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Sustainability and Geographical Studies, and a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Film Production. At the University of Louisville, a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration, a BA, and a Master's of Science in Materials and Energy Science and Engineering. And at the Murray State University, a Bachelor of Science in Respiratory Therapy and a Bachelor of Science in General Studies. We do have Melissa Bell available to respond to any questions, if there are any at this time. Hearing none, Chair Brandstedler, I'll turn it back over to you for a motion and a vote.
Thank you, Ms. Harper. On behalf of the committee, Ms. Harper has presented 2 new programs at Western Kentucky University, 2 new programs at the University of Louisville, and 2 new programs at Murray State University. So I have a motion to accept the committee's approval recommendations.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Hallbauer and a second by Mr. Minix. Is there any further discussion at this time? Seeing none, all those in favor, aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you to staff and the committee and the institutions for their work and getting these programs off the ground. Next item is item 8, the Executive Committee report and recommended action items. The Executive Committee has continued to meet at least monthly, and our conversations have also focused on COVID-19 responses and planning and how those actions intersect with our statewide strategic agenda. These conversations are ongoing and will continue to be a focus at our retreat in September. Today, on behalf of the committee, I do present 2 approval recommendations. First, staff have developed a 2020-2021 agency operating budget based upon the enacted state budget approved by House Bill 352. As you saw mentioned in the agenda materials, staff have remained conservative in their allocations and are prepared for a potential mid-year budget reduction. Second, about a year ago, we established 2 additional standing committees on a pilot basis through this month, the Finance Committee and the Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee. I think we can all agree that the new structure has been a success, and the Executive Committee recommends that we formally adopt the new committee structure by amending the bylaws accordingly. Those suggested amendments are highlighted in yellow in your agenda materials for you to review if you have any additional questions. Are there any questions or comments associated with these 2 items? Seeing none, can I ask for a motion to approve both the agency budget and the amendment to the council bylaws?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have Ms. Hallbauer, is that you? And then a second by Mr. Minix.
No, it was Zimmerman.
Shoot. Sorry. I don't see everybody on the bottom of my screen. Are there any additional questions or comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? All right, very, very good. The motion carries. Dr. Stat, as chair of the CEO, would you like to provide an update from the Committee on Equal Opportunities as associated with Section 9 in our agenda materials?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Chair Brandstetter. The CEO met on April 27th to hear the preliminary scores of the 2019 Diversity Plan Evaluation Reports. And we will meet again this Monday to review the final scores. Before I turn it over, though, to our staff, just a couple comments, if I can. First of all, on the Juneteenth comments from Aaron, I think Aaron should be promoted as an outstanding example of a Black achiever coming from a very modest background in Clay County. He's just an outstanding example of what can be done. And as far as the reports themselves go, I've noted that the universities are doing a very good job at smoothing out the diversity plans. They're cutting down the number of strategies, and they're focused on the significant issues rather than a number of strategies that are really on the edge. But I think the diversity plans are getting stronger and better. And then for those of us that work on reviewing the plans, I've submitted some ideas for the revision to have a more intuitive scoring approach, and we will be talking about that in our future meetings. Now, the staff are prepared to review the results of the final scores today, and at this time I'd like to turn it over to Travis Powell and Don Offit to give us some data and slides. Travis, Don, it's all yours.
Thanks, Dr. Stat. Just wait for the power up here.
Heather, I'm trying to share my screen, but it's not allowing me to.
I apologize. Try again.
Here we are. Well, good morning, everybody. So glad to be here. Extremely excited to talk to you about this today. As you all know, there is so much going on in this area, and I'm just really proud of the work that we've been able to do here at the council, as well as all the work that's being done on our campuses. I'll just get a little framework of what our discussion is going to be today. First off, we'll take you through our annual evaluation process. This is the second time we've done an annual evaluation under the new diversity policy framework that we have in place. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview of how the scoring works a little bit quicker than last year. You all are familiar with this, but I'll give you a little background to set up the score. Don's going to talk a little bit about the scoring, and then Devin Muff, our associate in the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion unit, has been doing a deep dive into all the reports, looking for best practices to share amongst the campuses, and he's going to highlight 3 strategies, the implementation and their analysis for you guys to show you some of the good work that's being done on our campuses. So I'll start with a little background. Dawn, if you'll go to the next slide, please. Sure. Now, just quickly, this is the framework that led up to the new policy that we're under today. Kentucky was put under a desegregation plan in 1982 to remove the vestiges of segregation in our education system. And so we worked through that process, and we're taken off the desegregation plan by the U.S. Department of Education in 2008. But we still had a statute in place that said that the council is to postpone the approval of new academic programs at institutions unless institutions meet their equal educational opportunity goals as set by the council. And it's up to the council to decide what those are. And we've done that through our statewide diversity policy. The first iteration of the policy after desegregation plan was done in 2010. And then the new policy that we're under now was adopted in 2016. I'll also take an opportunity to give a shout out to Sharon Jackson, who led the council's efforts in these areas during the desegregation plan and into the new plan moving in off of desegregation. And we do all our work now based off of what Sharon and the folks on the campuses were able to set forth And we would not be able to do what we're doing now without all the hard work that he did in this area for the council and for the state. So I just wanted to acknowledge him in the day that we acknowledge him for all his work that he's done here at the council. Next slide, please. So the institutional diversity plans address goals and strategies in 3 focus areas: opportunity, success, and impact. Those are also the 3 areas that you'll find in the council's strategic agenda. We wanted to promote alignment with our strategic agenda and our diversity policy, and so we've done that in the 3 focus areas. Opportunity focuses mostly on campus diversity. So the student body diversity of our campuses, both underrepresented minority students and other types of diversity as well, is acknowledged there. Success is what it sounds like. That's focused on student success. We want to close those achievement gaps that we're talking about so often for low income, both low income and underrepresented minority students. So we look at data there, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then the last section is impact. That talks about campus climate, ensuring that we have culturally competent students and faculty and staff, that we have faculty and staff diversity, and that the campus climates on our institutions are are so that people can feel comfortable to be themselves, because we know that if folks are comfortable to be themselves, they'll be way more successful in their academic pursuits. In the plans, institutions have to address each of the strategies that they're going to implement in these 3 areas, outline an appropriate plan for assessment. So not only do the institutions have to identify strategies, but they also have to tell us how they're going to assess whether or not those strategies are successful. Now, we're looking at some overall data on these items, but we wanted to get them into more detail to look at these specific strategies to know whether or not in the short term that they're being successful. Institutions and their plans must demonstrate institution-wide responsibility for these initiatives. So the diversity, equity, and inclusion cannot be something that just sits out here on the side to do its work while everything else, the other businesses, operate without considering those things. We do have those units that are paying close attention to these areas, but in all aspects of institutional operations, we want folks to be thinking about issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and their plans are able to show how that's being done on their individual campuses. And also we have the Committee on Equal Opportunities, which Dr. Stat chairs, and they provide policy oversight and plan implementation guidance. I want to give I'll name those members today: Whitney Allen, Deborah Aparicio, David Carpenter, Robert Croft, Alfonso de Torres Nunez, Miko Patty, Sean Reynolds. And Sean, you'll remember, is a former board member of the CPE, but agreed, and a former chair of the CEO, but agreed to stay on the CEO as a citizen member. So we're glad to have him. And Letitia Robertson. Our staff, Dr. Stat obviously is the chair. Kim Haubauer serves on this committee, and so does our student member, Grant Minix, and we appreciate his work that he's done with this group and during his year of service. I mention these folks because they do a great job. They ask great questions in the meetings, but also as part of this committee, you are part of the evaluation teams that actually do the evaluations of these plans, of the reports each year. And it is a lot of work, Dr. Stat will tell you, but it's good work and important work. And we could not do this without our board, these citizen members who do not get paid for their time to come on and actually review all these evaluation plans. Each review team does 4 or 5 reviews. It's a very heavy lift, but we get such rich feedback from those groups when they do those evaluations. And we really appreciate our board members' service in provide, especially when it comes to review time each year, because it is a lot of work, but it's important work, and you can see the impact on our campuses. Next slide, please. So the evaluation, is for calendar year 2019. The qualitative report is submitted in March, and then we review data from 2018 and 2019. We look at a lot of data for retention. Retention is from in the fall of 2019. We look at that data, and then all the other data that we look at usually from spring of 2019. So it's evaluated on each institution's annual report is evaluated based on a rubric divided into two sections. There's a quantitative section, a qualitative section, equally weighted for the most part, other than KCTCS, and I'll explain why that's the case here in a second. Simply because they don't have, we look at graduate enrollment, and obviously KCTCS doesn't have any graduate students. A minimum score for eligibility to offer new programs is a 24 for universities and a 22 for KCTCS institutions. And Don, in a second, will go over the scores for each year. But that's the framework for evaluation. Next slide, please. So on the quantitative side, we evaluate progress towards targets set in the following areas. Now, these targets, I'll remind you, are the targets that's set in the strategic agenda. Again, alignment is important to us, and so we're looking at targets in the following areas: undergraduate and graduate enrollment. We look at several different things in this area. We look at overall underrepresented minority enrollment. We look at specifically at our two largest URM groups in Kentucky, Hispanic, Latino Hispanic students, and also African American students as well. We look at first and second year retention for URM and low income students. We look at graduation rates for URM and low income students, degrees conferred, credentials awarded for URM and low income students, and we also look at workforce diversity. So those are our quantitative measures. There's, again, 9 areas for the universities and 8 areas for KCTCS institutions because they don't have any graduate enrollment. Scoring is very simple. If you meet your annual target or exceed it, then you get a 2. So if you're looking at a line, we set 5-year goals, and if you're looking at progress towards that 5-year goal, we create a line, linear path to that goal. And if you're above the line or on the line, then you've met the target. If you're below the line but above your baseline from 2015-16, then you receive a 1. And if you are below your baseline, then you receive a 0 for that year. And in the quantitative section, there's a maximum of 18 points for universities and 16 points for KCTCS institutions. Next slide, please. And this, the qualitative aspect of the report, I think is one of the places where we really add value beyond just the numbers. And again, it's in the 3 focus areas: opportunity, success, and impact. And as I mentioned earlier, institutions' plans have to identify strategies to meet the goals that are set forth in each of these focus areas. So in each focus area, the reports are evaluated based on the following criteria. So we look at the strategies and say, did you implement your strategy with fidelity? Did you implement what you told us you were going to do? You were told us you were going to implement a certain strategy. Give us evidence and proof that it was actually done as you indicated that it would be. Next item for each strategy is to analyze whether or not that strategy was effective. Now, this is these next 2 parts are extremely important because this really sets forth the continuous improvement model that is so important in this process. We want institutions have to analyze whether or not that individual strategy was effective. Now, some of this is done from data, it can be done from surveys from students to see if they were able to, whatever the strategy might be, if they perceive value out of it, but some way to let them know whether or not what they're doing is working or not working. And then once we've analyzed the strategy, we ask institutions, what lessons have you learned from this analysis and what are you going to do with this information moving forward? So let's say you pilot an area to increase the enrollment of Hispanic students and you target a certain recruiting in a certain area where you know it's a higher Hispanic Latino population. And that works really well. And you notice that you've had a lot of increase in enrollment in that area. Perhaps you increase your resources in that area based on this analysis. Or if the strategy is not working, maybe you abandon that strategy and move to another one, or you tweak it a little bit. Again, continuous improvement is really important, and that's what we wanted to put in place by this quantitative analysis piece. The 3 evaluations areas are scored on the following manner, and this is all outlined in the rubric specifically on how these are scored. 2, if you meet or exceed expectations. 1, if you're making progress towards meeting expectations, and 0, if you do not meet the expectations. Again, the way that these are scored are outlined in the rubric, and we have before our review teams evaluate these reports, they participate in norming sessions in order to make sure that the scoring is consistent amongst groups, and they're trained on how to score. And as part of the scoring process, they also give feedback as to why institutions receive the scores that they did. Again, it's not just a 2 or a 1 or a 0 that's put down. Our teams are actually giving substantive feedback as to why the institution scored what they did. Again, for continuous improvement purposes, that's designed to help institutions get better in these areas. There's a maximum of 18 points. There's 3 policy areas, and each with 3 evaluation areas, and a maximum of 2 points for each category, rounds up to 18. So that takes care of the qualitative analysis piece. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Offit to go through the timeline and then the actual evaluation of our scores, or the scores, and talk about the scoring for this year. So Dr. Offit, would you please take it over?
Thank you. So on the slide, you'll see the process timeline. And we wanted to include this timeline just to give you an idea of how long it actually takes to go through this entire process. And we started basically in October of last year, as we got some feedback in terms of institutions wanted us to provide technical assistance on report writing in terms of what the review team members were actually looking for. And so we started in October of last year, and we did some in-person technical assistance sessions, and we also recorded the session, and we were able to send that out to the institutions. We also had a new tool developed in order to connect to collect the data. And so when we collected the data, we wanted to make the verify studying the tools to make sure that what the institutions, as Travis said, we had a review team calibration meeting, and then we got to March where the plans were due. We disseminated those reports, a review team scored them, and the initial reports were submitted to the CEO in April. There were some institutions that initially did not meet the minimum score, and based on the feedback that Travis was just talking about from the review team, they were given the opportunity, if they so choose, to resubmit to have those narratives rescored. And so those submissions were due in May. Those revised, the requests for that were due in May. The revised reports were reviewed by our evaluation teams to which they applied. Not all evaluation teams had to do a resubmission. And then we're here where we're reporting the final scores. And so what happens is that if there's still any institution that does not meet the final score, then they have an opportunity to submit an improvement plan, because as Travis stated, that institutions that don't meet their minimum scores are not automatically eligible to apply for new academic programs in the next academic year. So they have opportunities to submit the improvement plans, and we'll be giving them those instructions in July. What's not on here is that, again, by the time they answer the questions and submit the improvement plans, then it has to go before the next CEO meeting in October for them to be approved. So again, it's a year-long process, if you will, in terms of the timeline that these diversity plan evaluations take place. So I want to share that with you. So on your screen now, you'll see the scores for the 4-year institutions. And what we've done is outlined specifically where you'll see the 2s, the 1s, and any 0s up in the qualitative section at the bottom. And the total score is listed below. So you'll see those scores for our 4-year institutions. And then the same applies for our KCTCS institutions. You'll see where there is the 2s, there are the 1s, there's the 0s where applicable, Again, at the top, you have the quantitative scores, and at the bottom, you'll have the qualitative scores, and the totals are outlined there in yellow. And you all have, I believe, this hard copy in your packet. So what you may notice is that Eastern Kentucky University is the only institution that did not meet the minimum requirements. So what that means is if they so choose, they will be given instructions to submit their improvement plan. And the improvement plan asks them a few questions. They'll have to address basically what they think went wrong, giving us a narrative about where there were opportunities for growth, and what they think basically went wrong in terms of either writing the report or collecting the data needed, etc. They'll also want to talk to us a little bit about how they plan to improve that going forward. And then they'll want to include information to make sure that this improvement plan does not divert funds from any of the budget that they plan to use going forward. So we want to make sure that we're not diverting funds from any where. So what they'll do is they'll give us that information. If the CEO chooses, they may recommend a site visit. Again, that would be determined based on COVID-19 and access, but they may want to talk to some individuals, have some more in-depth conversations with that institution. And then if the plan shows improvement, then the institution may then request a waiver once it is approved by the CEO to begin to request to offer new programs for the upcoming academic year. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Deborah Muff, who's going to talk to us a little bit about some of the high impact practices that we have collected, and he's done a great job working with reading the strategies, reading where there's some high impact practices that can be shared across the board under our categories of opportunity, success, and impact. So at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Deborah.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. It was my task to look at the high impact practices for each of these institutions. A lot of these institutions did a lot of great work with the strategies, but I just want to highlight just 3 of them today. So the first one that I'll talk about is from the University of Louisville, and the strategy was to implement best practices related to financial aid scholarship assistance to increase enrollment of underrepresented minorities, reduce application fees and scholarship. This was a great practice for them because it touched upon a couple different things. One of the things they did in the previous strategy submissions that they did, which they did was called the Cardinal Covenant, which gave scholarships to 70 students. Well, this next year, they started something that was called the Cardinal Pledge, which increased the amount given to students from 70 students the year before to over 400 students received scholarships. And these were for underrepresented minority students. So it helped to decrease the barrier of the financial burden that students may have going into college. And so that was just a great way for them to get involved with the students there. The second one, what I want to talk about is from Bluegrass Community and Technical College. Their strategy was to develop and implement a comprehensive array of academic, career, and support services for underrepresented minority students. I chose this one. I thought this was a great strategy that was a high impact practice for that. A couple institutions kind of did something along the lines, but I really liked what BCTC did here. And they started a scholarship program that was called the Academic Support Program Inspiring to Reach Excellence, or which was nicknamed ARISE was the acronym. And the students had to qualify to get the scholarship by doing several different things. But basically, this was a scholarship that gave money to students who were underrepresented minority students and who achieved a GPA of at least a 2.5 and who qualified to complete the FAFSA as well. The award can be anywhere from $500 to $1,000, and it can be renewed up to 4 semesters. But I really like this because It has students enroll into the FYE, the first year experience 105 course. And what that course was set up was to give students tips and strategies of how to be best successful in college throughout their whole career. And it also used peer-to-peer mentoring. So students who have been through the class already for the FYE 105 class, they were paired up with a new student there, and so that helped the student get along in their first year. They saw incredible results with this. From fall 2018 to spring, they saw a 100% retention rate from fall to spring, and 81% of the students were in good standing with an average GPA of 2.88. In the spring semester, they had, from spring to fall, they had a 92% retention rate, with 92% of the students were in good standing with an average GPA of 2.9. So these were outstanding results that they found from this strategy, which proved to be effective for them. The last one that I want to touch on is from Northern Kentucky University, and their strategy was to increase the diversity of faculty, management, and staff by ensuring search process are equitable and consistently applied. I really like this strategy because what Northern Kentucky is doing over there is they have some cool things going on with their Office of Inclusive Excellence. And what this office does is make sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion are in every practice around the institution. And so whether that be in the enrollment or the students on campus already are within the hiring practice, their practices. This particular strategy was towards the hiring practices. So what they did was they created a new guideline for hiring faculty and created an equity framework to hire diverse faculty and staff. The goal of this strategy was to try to get awareness out to underrepresented minority faculty and staff, and I would say they found results. So for the underrepresented faculty, they saw the applicants increase from 557 the previous year, and that increased to 778. And then on the staff side, for underrepresented minorities, they saw an increase from 821 the previous year to 887 in this planning year. And so this strategy proved to be very effective, and they're going to keep doing things with the Office of Inclusive Excellence on how they touch upon different things on campus and how to increase that. But they actually hire more underrepresented faculty this year than they did in the previous year as well. So it proves to be effective for them.
Thank you for sharing those strategies, Devin. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we reiterated is the fact that these strategies scored particularly well from the review teams. And we want to make sure that as we're looking at strategies, we are able to provide some high impact practices that institutions of similar demographics would be able to hopefully implement if they saw that as something they could do on their campuses. So we're trying to make sure that we are looking at the strategies, looking at the scores, looking at what's being done, comparing that with the quantitative section and the data to look for increases, and then be able to share that across institutions. Before we leave the section, I would be remiss if I did not echo the sentiment of Dr. Stat earlier when he talked about these strategies and the fact that this is our second iteration of reviewing these evaluation plan reports, and how the strategies the institutions have worked really hard to make sure that their strategies are streamlined and that they are achievable and not broad or general. And so I wanted to also state that giving special recognition to Western Kentucky University, Kentucky State University, and Maysville Community and Technical College. Last year, those institutions did not meet their minimum scores, and they went through the improvement plans and were subsequently able to apply for new academic programs, but you'll see this year that they met their minimum scores. And so I just want to make sure that we recognize the hard work that they've done there. So before we end the session, we wanted to talk briefly about the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that we have going on in our office. So in November of last year, we had our Higher Equity Symposium. Some of you may have been able to attend. And you see we have higher equity because higher equity is that intersection where higher education and equity converge. And our symposium provides a forum for discussion about current trends, issues, and concerns within diversity, equity, and inclusion. For this session, it was hosted by the University of Kentucky, and we had approximately almost 200 registrants there, which included students, faculty, and staff. We had some nationally known speakers that came and talked to us, Dr. Sean Harper and Dr. Samuel Museas, and several breakout sessions. We received a lot of great feedback on this session because it allowed opportunities for individuals in diversity, equity, and inclusion across the state to come together and have a forum to be able to not only discuss these issues, but also have professional development opportunities. But what we did not want was it to stop there. We wanted to continue this discussion throughout the year, and we wanted to ensure that we had opportunities to continue this conversation and not just be something where we were just talking about it one time per year. So I'll talk a little bit more about our webinar series in a moment. But one of the things we've also able to do, we received a grant from the Lumina Foundation that would help us to not only create a cultural competence certification or begin the process of that, but also to reinstate our Academic Leadership Development Institute. So as we talk about our cultural competence certification, you've heard us say that in our diversity policy, particularly under the section of impact, it talks about making sure that we have graduates from our institutions that are not only culturally competent, but we also have faculty and staff that are culturally competent as well. And so we wanted to make sure that we were able to define what that was. What does that look like? If an employer says, I want to hire this student, and the student we're saying is culturally competent, what should that employer be able to look for in demonstrations from that student? What should they be experiencing? What should they have knowledge of? We want to make sure that we start talking about what that looks like. And we also want to make sure that our faculty and staff are that as well. So we brought together representatives from many of our public post-secondary institutions, both faculty and staff, to begin to discuss what might be the minimum competencies that we could agree upon statewide that faculty, staff, and ultimately students need to be able to demonstrate, experience, have knowledge of, to be considered culturally competent. And then be able to have an assessment that can measure that, and then be able to ultimately provide some type of credentialing, micro-credentialing, some type of certification badge, so people would know that individuals have completed this particular course. And we wanted to be able to also ensure that once we decided upon those minimum competencies, institutions would be able to have some flexibility in the event that they wanted to offer more information. So we're in the process of doing that. We had our first meeting back in March. And of course, with COVID-19, we had to make some adjustments, but we are looking to be able to come up with those minimum certifications by the end of July, being able to have curriculum developed around there, and hopefully, well, I'm not gonna say hopefully because I know Dr. Thompson has told us we are going to in January be able to pilot this certification. So we're very excited about that. In addition, we've had our Academic Leadership Development Institute, which is a group of underrepresented early career minority faculty and staff that we brought together to be able to provide professional development to them in terms of what they might need if they want to pursue whatever leadership career and leadership path they so choose. We had our first meeting again in March, and again, we made some adjustments with COVID-19, and we'll be continuing to work with that group of individuals. They have come together, they have engaged extremely well, and it's exciting to be able to provide this information and opportunity for these individuals to be able to take back and share with their institutions. And as we all know, COVID-19 hit pretty quickly and pretty hard, and we wanted to make sure that we provided resources for our diversity, equity, and inclusion faculty and staff to be able to help them as they navigated this uncharted and new territory. And so we have created a DEI and COVID-19 resource hub on our website. You'll see the website listed below to provide not only articles, but webinars and information to help our individuals who work in this particular area to have some kind of resource to be able to fall back on. And then we've also had our higher equity webinar series that I told you we did not want the symposium to be a one and done. We wanted to continue this conversation. And so we were always going to continue the conversation even before COVID-19 and these particular social injustices that have been occurring. But we have ensured that we were meeting the needs of our constituents, our institutional diversity reps and those working in the area. So we've had webinars on inclusive online instruction. We've had webinars on ensuring that people have an idea of what fall of 2020 will look like in the midst of COVID-19. And our most recent one that Dr. Thompson was talking about earlier featured him entitled Education, a Catalyst for Systematic Change. And as you know, we had to date over 1,600 views. We'll also be doing a follow-up for that with Dr. Thompson on July 1st, because there were so many questions, we were not able to get to all of them in that 1 hour time frame. And so we're going to have a follow-up where we're doing more of an interview, question and answer, and allowing people to ask questions so we can continue this conversation. So we've been doing a lot of work, as you can see, with DEI. We wanted to make sure that we share those initiatives with you all. At this time, are there any questions on the report or the efforts that we're doing?
I'd just like to say
Actually,
thank you for the effort that you're putting into this and making it a priority. I know it's a journey and it's a long journey and it's not an easy journey. So thank you for the effort that you're putting
in. I'd like to just point out one thing, that during the scores and that sort of thing, many of the universities and colleges really increased their scores, and it appears that there's significant buy-in to the plan, and the universities aren't treating it like they used to with the 1+ approach. You know, if we have one more, we're good. They're taking this seriously and really doing a good job in many instances.
If there are no other questions, then that concludes our report.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Dr. Stat, Travis, Dr. Offit, appreciate everybody's input and work in this arena. We're going to move on to item 10 in our agenda, the communication and outreach. And our last report is from Sue Patrick, and she just showed up on the corner of my screen. Morning, Sue.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Chair Branstetter. It's a pleasure to be with the council this morning. Just by way of background, the Communications Office communicates a lot of work about the agency, from the strategic agenda to all the different activities in all of our different priority areas. But our office does focus a lot on priority 1, which is to build broad understanding about the value and benefits of higher education. I'd like to introduce my 2 staff members, very talented and just wonderful employees of the council. Mike Gwynn is a senior associate who does a lot of wonderful writing, and Gabrielle Gayhart, also a senior associate, serves as our digital communications manager. So I've got 3 recent activities that I want to report on. The first is the COVID-19 on Campus blog series that we launched. And that was basically to provide an in-depth look at how our colleges and universities quickly responded to the pandemic and did so with both innovation and compassion. The series highlighted numerous campus efforts ranging from campuses supplying protective gear to medical professionals or adopting pass-fail grading policies, and just many more. And in addition to this blog series, we have a blog called Policy Insight. And this series lives on this blog. But anyway, we've ramped that up as well. And this has been extremely successful, both in terms of growing our audiences. And you've heard me say we don't have faculty, we don't have students or a football team. So it's a little harder for us to grow our audiences. And it's been successful in building the case that higher education matters and getting out all the great work that folks in our offices are accomplishing, and council actions for that matter. I'll share some stats. Through May of this year, readership on Policy Insight, including the COVID series, jumped 164% compared to this time last year. And then the page views increased 206% compared to the same time period in 2019. And in our business, we like to say the stories have been extremely sticky, meaning that the metrics show readers are staying with the stories for longer periods of time. And that's really a great measure of success. So while the stories themselves are strategic and they're focused on issues that readers want to know more about and the types of information that the council needs to get out, part of the success in the readership and in the stickiness is due to the targeted emails that we distribute and the social media effort to drive traffic to each blog story. And just as an example, on Twitter alone, which is our primary social media platform. We love them all, but that's where we get the most traction. We've seen an uptick in engagement and in the number of followers. And as an example, I won't run through all of our stats, but President Thompson's Twitter feed has gained 317 new followers since the beginning of the year. So we think that's terrific. The second item in my report deals with the free application for federal student aid. And I'm sure that you all have heard that applications for the FAFSA are down compared to this time last year. Through May 15th, the data revealed an overall decrease of 2.7% in Kentucky. And for our Pell eligible students, it's even more concerning because of a 3.8% drop in this demographic. And as you know, these are the very students with the greatest financial need. So since I convened the public relations and marketing officers at the campuses, they asked CPE to develop and lead a promotion for higher education statewide to encourage more FAFSA applications. So a couple weeks ago, we kicked off a hashtag FAFSA Friday campaign on social media with campuses and many partners. And I've got to pause and just say we work with some of the best partners that any organization that could work with. Of course, we've got our own Gear Up Kentucky helping. They're not just helping, they're helping students year long in filling out the FAFSA, but they're also supporting with marketing as well. We work with the Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence, the Education and Workforce Development Cabinet, and of course the Kentucky Higher Education Assistance Authority that is really big in the outreach component. And it's probably a lot because of all of these partners in our campuses, of course, is why these numbers aren't as bad as what they might be in other states. So every Friday through July, partners will be posting FAFSA promos on their social media channels. And also, as part of our media work related to this initiative, President Thompson was interviewed by a National Associated Press reporter this week. And the interview apparently went so well, I wasn't on the call, that he wants to interview students in our state and to get some of their reactions to the FAFSA. So we're real pleased with the progress we've been able to make. And just yesterday, We were pleasantly surprised that Governor Beshear talked about the need to fill out the FAFSA during his briefing, and Lee had really set that up by sending that over to the Lieutenant Governor's office. So we were pleased with that. We were included in his press release today, and I've seen where 2 outlets anyway, maybe more, I haven't really checked, but 2 outlets have taken out the FAFSA and just reported out a story from the governor on the FAFSA alone. And this was, by the way, the first thing that the public relations and marketing officers asked us to do, and that was to involve the governor. And so lastly, we'll be producing the council president's e-newsletter each month. Higher Ed News will reach key stakeholders, including all of you, legislators, campus presidents, the executive branch, boards of regents, and our national and state policy partners. We will address President Thompson's key topics, so it'll be current, and provide another venue to communicate why higher education matters, what the council is doing about it, as well as other key issues and news, upcoming events. So in closing, we have a video of just over a minute in length that we want to present. More than a year ago, I believe it was November 2018, the Higher Learning Advocates selected President Thompson as one of their national education champions for their Champions Network. And I want to say that there's probably 12 national champions. It's kind of hard to tell from their website, but there could be up to 15. So it's a select group of higher education leaders in the nation. And Higher Learning Advocates, if you're not familiar with them, is a bipartisan nonprofit group working to ensure greater quality, affordability, and student success. And they contracted with a video firm out of Texas to produce the video. And I was kind of, just on a personal note, I was kind of surprised that the videographer I apparently don't know his skill and in that profession very well, but he wasn't about to, rent equipment when he got here, but he drove a truck or a van all the way from Texas to do this video of Aaron. And it turned out just really well. And I wanted you to see this, and Heather's going to get it started for us.
Going to college, in fact, to me, was a route out of poverty. And it was tough, seriously tough, because it was during those days when African Americans were just coming into predominantly white institutions. But that struggle helped me to understand the value of higher education, and that made me want to give it back. Kentucky students are facing some of the things I faced many years ago when I was going to college. Whether or not college is for me, or whether or not I even know what college is. We also heard a lot about students believing they're not college material. How do we reach out to all of the students that may not be engaged? We have 600,000+ adult learners. Many of our students are part-time. So we here in Kentucky are fostering a way of thinking about that. Truly pushing merit, but also pushing more need-based, pushing more wraparound services for higher input. What gives me hope is that there are many people out there like the Higher Learning Advocates that are willing to put their time, effort, resources to do that. And I know many people who are just like me that are feeling that impact on what happened in their lives and are willing to share it with others.
And that concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Just a comment. So Aaron, you're going to have to share with us, what is the chopper?
Thank you, Kim.
How do we get access to that video? I think, I'd love to share that out on all the social channels that we're on. Love to get it out there. It was phenomenal. It was great.
I'm not sure if we have it posted on our website, but I'll make sure that we do. I know we distributed it in social media, but we'll get that link out to all the council members. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
And Kim, if I answered your question, I'd rather tell you the lie than the truth on it, because one is really not that cool. The other one sounds really cool. I'll let you figure out which one is which.
Sue, on the e-news, you said presidents. I would make sure you include the provosts of the schools too with that, because the presidents often have an external view of the education, whereas the provosts are the ones that hit the ground with the faculty and learning.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you, Dr. Stat.
Sue, thank you for your report and the video, and would encourage everybody to post that on their social media.
Thank you.
Item 11 is other business, and we've actually approved the resolutions at the beginning of today's meeting, so we can move on from that. Several of the campuses have provided written reports in your materials, so please review those if you have not already. I believe they start on page 138. Well, a little bit down, 142 on your onboard materials. I do have one last thing I'd like to mention before we leave today, and it's that our next meeting and our annual retreat combination will be held in September. We plan to do a deep dive into our strategic planning and all the elements, current events, and unexpected changes that have occurred and how those will coincide with our state goals. We want to make sure we don't lose sight of our 2030 goals that we have set out in our strategic plan. But for now, I want to wish everyone to have a wonderful summer. Come back in August and September and be ready to again get to work. And I am very hopeful that we'll all be able to get together in person for our next meeting. So I've enjoyed seeing everybody on the screen today, and thank you for all your input, voting, and considerations today. If anybody else has anything, please speak up.
I'd just like to thank Kim for doing a great job and keeping everything going during all of this, and all of staff. I don't know how they're coping with everything, but great thank yous to all of everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. The only other thing, and I think Kevin has already left the call, but just whether, we're going to be looking at curriculum for, the Juneteenth thing, for instance. If we're really going to be looking at, we're talking about what we are doing at the college level on diversity and inclusion, but the conversation starts much younger and earlier, and not everyone in Kentucky is getting that at home. And I'll never forget a trip to, if anyone's been to Gatlinburg and they've gone to that arena where they do the fight, they show the like the North and the South fighting each other. I can't remember what it's called, something Dixie. And I remember leaving there. My daughter was little, and we were with another family, and my daughter asked, what are they fighting over? And I was explaining to her about the Civil War, and the other family, who are good friends of mine, shocked me when they said, we don't talk about those things with our children, which shocked me, right? But I think, but for that video, but for someone's cell phone, you guys, we wouldn't even be having these conversations that we're having today, because we have consciences too. And I just feel like now's a time for us to be having deeper conversations about how we introduce, these bias, whether they're, whether they are implied or I guess not known, but occur for all of us. I just hope that we'll look at in the schools what we can do earlier on to have real conversations about the history in this country and what we can do to be better. End of story.
Well, I just can't let that go without responding. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And it is a conversation that we're having now more than ever with our Kentucky Board of Education. And you heard the governor and the lieutenant governor coming out making those statements. But we also, though, for those who know about it, if you read it, we moved things around to really have a strong P20 system in place. And that goes to what I call the fabric also of P12 as well as higher ed. And the curriculum has to change. It has to change in P12 and it has to change in higher ed. We have no choice but to make it that way now. The education and training has to change. The professional development has to be different. And so we can't do this at one end of the spectrum.
Right.
And you just can't do it. You won't be successful that way. So I really appreciate, Christy, that statement. And you're absolutely right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody. With no nothing else on the agenda, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation and attention, and I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.